What's up guys, this is Desm101. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be starting a new series called In Defense Of, where I'm going to be taking a look at a middling average game to lesser known to not liked games, and basically giving my take on them and why I think they're worth your time or a little better than people might think. And we're going to start off with Wrath of the Black Manta on NES.
The late 80s and early 90s were filled with ninjas in pop culture, and video games were no exception, my favorite title being Shinobi in the arcades. And I did of course play a lot of the other games like Ninja Gaiden, but this one I felt like just had that perfect mix of action and platforming. But when it came to the home ports of Shinobi, well, we were left with kind of some odd options. Shinobi on the NES was an unlicensed port. That developer is actually unknown, but it looks rather bad in my opinion. It still has some of the same play mechanics such as the melee attacks, but now you have a life bar. But the graphics and controls are particularly poor. I mean, look at the boss. He doesn't even look very much like the original boss, and those fireballs. What the heck, they look like meatballs flying at me. Now, it's in that context that I'd like you to consider Wrath of the Black Manta, which I rented around this time as a kid. Released in 1989 originally as Ninja Cop Saizo, this is a game developed by AI, the same people who worked for Hudson in developing the Bonk 2 and 3 on the TurboGrafx 16. In the game, you play as the ninja Saizo, who must go and rescue kidnapped children throughout the 6 stages. In the game, you must rescue the children by searching through specific rooms, very similar to Rolling Thunder, except you need to go into each room and sometimes you have to defeat enemies. You're equipped with special ninja magic, and you need to use these to defeat the enemies as well as the boss at the end of each stage. The game makes use of several cutscenes, which have a very cartoony art style that help tell the story in between levels and also as you rescue the kids. The following year, Taito published the game as Wrath of the Black Manta here in the US, with a few changes, mostly being the artwork from the cutscenes in between the stages now looks a lot more gritty, as well as the bosses have been changed. They also removed a level. Here in the intro you can see that your master looks a lot like Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid. Now, the game was not received well, both back then and today. It's generally regarded as an either average game or a poor game, with most people recommending other ninja games instead of it. Which was actually a huge surprise to me, finding this out, because I had the impression that it was a pretty good game, and it was decent fun. Now, with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the game and see what it has good going for it. The first point is the art style and the controls. I feel like the game overall looks pretty good. It's not outstanding or super impressive, but it does a nice job of detailing what you're looking at, and it's easy to understand how to control your character and how to complete the moves to get through the game. The second good thing is that it's a casual pick up and play kind of game, so you don't have to invest a ton of time practicing this or getting the hang of it. You can just kind of pick it up and get into it, play through the game, and have a nice casual experience. It's not a huge investment, it's not stressful, and doesn't upset you really. It's a pretty simple game. The boss fights are always a positive point in my eyes. There's a good variety of bosses and the way that you need to fight them, although with your ninja magic it might be just a little too easy. But still, they look pretty cool and they provide some good fun in the gameplay. And finally, the last point I wanted to mention is that the game has a bit of variety in the gameplay styles. You also do some side-scrolling shoot-'em-up style stages where you're like a ninja on a kite, and then also some behind-the-back third-person views that are very brief, but still are quite nice to break up the action. So that brings us to the downside. What really makes this game still kind of bad? Well, there are a few issues. The main being that it is very repetitive, both from a gameplay perspective in the level design and the music as well. The gameplay just has you doing the same repetitive tasks over and over again in each stage, which gets pretty old, and it could have really used a bit more variety in the stage designs and the locations to kind of flesh out the idea some more. In those rescue rooms where you're looking for the kids, you'll basically see the same enemy sets over and over again, which gets a little old after a while, but it's not too bad. And the music, there's only a few tunes in the game, and they're repeated for each level basically, so you're going to end up hearing the same songs droning on and on. They're not really great music either, so that can kind of grind on you a little bit after too long. The game is also fairly short. As I mentioned before, there was a stage that was taken out for the US release, which in itself is already a pretty short game, and on top of that, it's far too easy in my opinion. So in that repetitive state where you're going and rescuing the kids, they'll always tell you about a secret location, and it's usually found just outside of the room somewhere. And it's basically the same location or same type of secret that you'll find in every stage over and over. And in these secret areas, you can defeat a group of enemies and get a bit of your health back, as well as pick up power-ups such as life and power-ups for your power bar that increase your ninja magic strength. But this doesn't really add to the challenge at all. It makes the game really, really easy, which can be a fault for some people, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that in this list. And finally, one of the reasons that the game is more well known today is for stealing artwork, or being heavily inspired by artwork from How to Draw a Marvel Comics book, which is a book that I had as a kid, and I didn't instantly recognize it, but now seeing it, it's very clear that a lot of the images for the cutscenes in the US version were almost taken directly from that book, which that's not very good on the developer. So while not a perfect or amazing game, a true underrated classic, this game is kind of above average, and when you compare it to Shinobi on the NES, like I mentioned earlier, it's actually a pretty good Shinobi game on the NES if you're looking for more of that type of action. So I would say I recommend this, also because it's fairly inexpensive to pick up. You can get it for around 10 bucks without the box, and that's worth it in my opinion. So why don't you go ahead and try it out and let me know what you think if you played Wrath of the Black Manta. Alright, that's going to wrap it up today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.